Stop being a creep. Okay guys, in today's video, I'm gonna go over 4 non-creepy ways to seduce a lady. And, more importantly, kind of define for you exactly what being creepy really means. So, you can take this concept and run with it and avoid making these mistakes in the future. Let's get stuck into it. My name is Sterling Cooper. I'm an award-winning adult film star. I'm also a former high-class male companion, and this is my YouTube channel. So what does it mean to be creepy? A lot of guys get accused of being creepy. A lot of girls throw out this as a kind of shaming tactic on dudes they don't like a lot of the time. They're calling them creepy. So it's interesting when you look at the kinds of things that women will objectively call creepy, the kind of actions that girls will call creepy, it varies depending upon the guy they're talking about. Surprise, surprise. One guy can do act X and it be not creepy, and another guy can do the exact same thing and it can come across as creepy. So what you should take away from that is it's less about the act itself, although some things are definitely creepy, and it's more about the subtext and the subcommunication of your personality when you're doing said act. So let's go into some examples. I would argue that creepy, in the general context, what women would define as creepy, an easier way for a guy to understand it is basically one of two things: incongruence or hesitancy. I'll say that again, and I'll define that, elaborate a bit on that. Incongruence. Well, congruency is when your thoughts, your words, and your actions are kind of in perfect alignment. So what would be an example of incongruency? Well, incongruency would be, say, talking a big talk, or talking all confident, and then, say, going to grab her hand, and your hand is being all shaky and hesitant and stuttering, right? Hesitancy is very creepy to women. Perfect example. Lovely lady is sitting at a bar, right? And she makes eye contact with a dude across the room. Now, here's the kicker. If he doesn't go and talk to her, okay, he's lost, basically. He didn't go approach a young woman who's probably interested in him. Also, what's even worse is if he hesitates to go and talk to her. When he does eventually go and talk to her, she will think he's creepy. Even though she initiated the interaction by looking at him and giving him what we would call, like a choosing signal or an indicator of interest, right? This is the kicker. Hesitancy is creepy to women. So, if you hesitate to, say, go up and approach to a girl, or you hesitate to make that move, this signals a lack of confidence, and it also basically signals incongruency because you kind of did this thing, but you did it, it's not really you if you didn't do it immediately. I know this sounds fucked up, but this is female logic for you. This is welcome to the wonderful world of the female brain. I'm just translating this for you. So, that act of being hesitant is in and of itself rather creepy. One more key thing that I forgot to mention in regards to what women define as creepy is actually, this is the third one, I said there was 2, there's actually 3, is actually neediness. Anything that is done with the subcommunication that is coming from a place of neediness is always going to be interpreted as creepy. So, the really confident guy could do something physically, say, I don't know, say like smell a girl's hair in the context of seducing her, he's getting up and close to her. If it's not coming from a place of neediness, it's seductive. But the dude who's desperate for attention, desperate for validation, needs her approval, needs to get his pee-pee touched, anything he does basically is going to come across interpreted as creepy. So neediness is one of the fundamental things that make your actions come across as creepy. So, now that we know what creepy is, let's give you guys some ways to non-creepily seduce a woman. Because a lot of the time, the things that dudes do to quote-unquote try and seduce a woman come across as creepy, I believe, because of these first two things. One, either they're coming across incongruent, or two, they're coming across as being hesitant in that act. So let's give you some helpful, practical how-tos. So the first thing I want to give you guys, the first tool I want to give you rather, is actually a verbal tool. It's you know, you could take what I'm about to, the example I'm going to give you verbatim and say this thing verbatim, but the general concept, this is an old school PUA concept actually, and for those of you who aren't familiar, I used to, when I was in my early 20s, I was terrible with women, so I jumped onto Google and I typed how to get better with women, and flash forward, a decade, I'm an adult film star, I was a high-class male companion, I've been getting paid to lay pipe for 8 years. So this stuff does actually work. Anyway, this concept I'm going to share with you right now is the idea of a statement of intent. Now, what is a statement of intent? A statement of intent, basically, the purpose of a statement of intent is it communicates to her that this interaction between you and her is not a platonic, we're going to be friends kind of interaction. But you're doing it in a non-creepy way, you're doing it in a smooth way, not in a way that's sort of overt, and not in a way that is needy. That's the very important thing. So, with the statement of intent, you basically make sure that she understands the subtext of this interaction is, if you stick around, if you hang around with me, we're gonna end up having sex. That's the context. But it's done in a non-needy way. It's done in an it's done in a confident, smooth way. So, and you'll also notice that there's no hesitancy here. This kind of eliminates the idea of hesitancy, or preemptively eliminates the idea of hesitancy, because you're saying this stuff, early on in your interaction with a lady, either via text or either via, in the beginning of the date or whatever it is, or when you're picking up at the bar earlier on, whatever it is, it's said in the beginning of the interaction or early on in the interaction, so that sets the tone, right? So that there's no, oh, he hesitated to show his intent later on down the line. So doing multiple things for you. So, without further ado, here's an example of what a statement of intent might be. You have to admit, our kids would look pretty hot. What is that saying? So let's break that down for a second. You have to admit our kids would look pretty hot. Well, then it's implying that we're going to have sex and I'm going to put babies in her, basically. But it's done in a cocky, funny kind of way. It's saying that, it's also saying, I think you're attractive, but it's also saying that I think I'm attractive. So it's cocky, it's narcissistic, it's confident, it's not needy, it's not supplicating, it's not I need your approval. It's like, I'm calling this situation out like it is, and I'm doing it in a confident way. So that's a great example of a statement of intent. And you might follow that up with, if you're an asshole like me, you might follow that statement up with something like, yeah, they'd have my eyes, and my jawline, and my hair, and my good looks, and my intelligence, and my charming personality, and you just keep listing off attributes about yourself and never mention anything about her. It's hilarious, it goes down, in my opinion, it goes down quite well. I've used this multiple times, whatever. I'm a narcissist, sue me. So basically what the statement of intent does, it allows you to hit on her in a non-creepy way, and it also, if she's around friends as well, it also kind of calls out the context to her friends as well, so that they kind of know what the deal is. And this actually does work in your favor, in my opinion, in a lot of circumstances. Okay, the second tip for today on how to seduce her in a non-creepy way is real simple shit, guys. Get back to high school, playground kind of shit. Hold her hand. Holding her hand and having her kind of hold onto your arm as you walk her around on your date, through the bar, wherever it might be. Having her hold on to you in that kind of gentlemanly manner and holding her hand, it's just all just leading her, but you're leading her physically and you're establishing, again, that this is a romantic context, right? This is not a friends don't, platonic friends don't hold hands. Guys in the friend zone don't hold girls' hands. Sometimes maybe they'll hold onto their arm, maybe, but for the most part they don't. So that's a really important thing to establish, again, early on, and there's something about, at least in my opinion, the first time you hold a girl's hand can be quite emotionally charged, quite sexually charged. That, for me at least, was always sort of the very beginning of me knowing I can escalate this towards sex, was how she is, her receptiveness to me holding her hand. Because there's a lot of things you can gauge from that. If you hold onto her hand, does she hold onto it and squeeze back? Does she disengage? Right? And you can play with that too. You can hold her hand, lead her places, and then you can be the one to break the handhold off, and then, you know, to check your phone or to do something or to talk to somebody, whatever it might be, and then put your hand back in the same spot. Does she re-engage and hold your hand again? These are all really subtle things you can use to gauge her level of interest and get her adopting that frame of following you, you being the leader, you being the masculine, more dominant one there. And the same thing goes to the hand around the arm, like walking arm in arm that way. I think this is a great way to start off dates and interactions, or maybe not beginning, but sort of halfway between a date, in the middle of a date when you start moving around locations. I think that the handhold, the armhold, and walking her around and showing her around is a great way to establish this kind of dynamic of we are in a romantic relationship and it's escalating towards sex. Now, this third way of non-creepily seducing a woman is something that I discovered only within the last year, actually, and it's kind of an example of what I like to call serendipity engineering. So you're kind of deliberately engineering this scenario to play out in your favor. So the scenario is you're going to lift her up and carry her over something in a gentlemanly way. So when I say lift her up, I mean like carry her like this, like you would carry a bride over the bridal threshold when you bring her home. That carry, right? Like lifting up under her knees and supporting under her arms here. So this does a couple things for you. So when I say engineering it, I mean I will deliberately, if I'm walking a girl, you know, back to my place from a date, or walking her from one bar to another on a date, or whatever it might be, I will deliberately find, and I might have pre-planned this, or I might improvise this on the fly, but I'll try to deliberately find a puddle, or a gap in the road, or something, a barrier, or something that I can gentlemanly pick her up and carry her over so she doesn't have to walk over it, especially if she's wearing high heels. Maybe it's like unstable ground or holes where her high heel might get trapped, whatever it is. So I can physically pick her up and carry her over it. So this does a couple of things. It shows that I'm physically dominant, I'm physically stronger than her, I'm obviously a superior physical specimen to her, but it establishes that strength, right, that women want to feel from their man. It also obviously puts her in that romantic context and starts playing on all these sort of romantic fantasies of the bride being carried across the threshold of the family home, whatever it might be, or a woman literally being swept off her feet in a fantasy novel. So you're playing on all these kind of romantic stereotypes that she already has in her head, and you letting her own subconscious do the seducing for you, really. All you have to do is engineer an excuse to do it. And obviously, go on a date with a woman who is smaller than you. If you're walking around going on dates with 300+ pound women, then this might be a bit harder to pull off. The fourth way to non-creepily seduce a woman, and this is actually the most powerful technique I'm talking about here in today's video, and that is subtly having your legs touching each other when you're talking with her. Now, the way I like to pull this off is we're in a bar or wherever I'm on the date, rather than having her sitting across from me, like interview style, I like to have her sitting next to me as much as I can, so that our thighs are just resting against each other. What you'll find this does is this will sexually charge any conversation. It doesn't matter how mundane, boring the conversation is, or what you guys are actually saying. Just the fact that your legs are touching, just the fact that there's constant physical contact between the two of you whilst the conversation's going on will make it more sexually charged, will make it more emotional, and you'll feel this energy coming off her. You'll feel that she's picking up on that vibe. No, it doesn't, and it's unexplainable. It's just happening. It's just magical, which is kind of what you want to engineer in your interactions with women anyway. They can't quite put their finger on why they like you so much. Well, it's because our legs were touching. And it creates this kinesthetic touch, amplifies any interaction that a man and a woman have together. And when you're in that position where your legs are touching next to each other, there's a couple other things you can play on. So you can sort of, if you're in a bar or whatever, you're obviously sitting next to each other. The two of you can look onto the rest of the crowd and people watch and discuss stuff. And it allows you to lean in and whisper into her ear. It puts you in a really good position for escalating things even further. But that is, for me at least, is a great way to start that physical escalation and escalating things towards a more sexual context and a sexual dynamic between the two of you. So now you know how to seduce a woman in a non-creepy fashion. How do you actually know that she's into you? Well, check out this video right here.